Hello and welcome. I'm the Restless Kaiser.
I'm Brush and Quill.
I'm Johnny B.
I'm Medieval Wargamer.
But together we are
Modeling for Advantage. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. See who we got in the chat tonight. We have got Shackles and Sprues. We got Nick from Team Clueless Games, Axe and Axe, Rich M. Thought I was going to be late. We were a bit late because I needed to get a big one out of the corner of my nose, you know. Rosie is here. Gary is here. Tony Halton. Glenn Dewar is here. What are we all working on tonight? We'll get to that. Alid is here. Alid wants Rosie to make him a flag. You think she can do that, John?
Most probably.
Nick is working on a human Blood Bowl team. Just got to finish the ogre. Is that a bit like the troll for the goblin team?
Yeah, man.
Tony Hammond-Jan says, evening peeps, painting some German half tracks. Nice. Are they 25mm or 15s? Which company? Which ones are you doing? Andy Sykes. Sobs has joined us. He's going to drink every time we say Gamberson. I don't know whether we're going to get drilled down into the detail that much, are we, Nick? Is Gamberson on the menu tonight?
We can discuss about armor for sure. It's no problem.
We're going to talk about armor. Okay.
We can open this subject.
We're going to open up the subject. All right. There's pirate painting. Gary, Sub, Shackles, Bruce. Okay, that's us. Hobbying then. What hobbying are we up to tonight? I am going to be continuing on one of those. I'm trying to get these things that I've had like on the shelf forever. So I've got some of this 50mm Flames of War British Infantry. I'm just doing like faces and webbing now, you know. So I've got the old reading glasses on so I can see them. I'll pull the light in a sec, and I just realised that one of the bases is actually stuck to the tree. It's been here that long. What have you been up to, Callum? What are you hobbying tonight?
I'm going to be building some more Ratkin for Kings of War.
Oh yeah.
Ambush.
Kings of War Ambush. That's going to be a new thing for Callum and I to play once a month, isn't it?
I've got 5 so far, so I'm going to build 5 more.
I could maybe get these archers done for the second battle. These are Perry miniatures.
Yeah, amazing.
Roses do. So that would be on topic, but instead I'm likely going to paint some BattleTech or a random Sikh dude for the 8th Army. He's very washed out at the moment. Not that you can see because it's too light, but wait, I might do that. And obviously, Nick, you're not going to be doing any hobby because you are here to talk to us about many, many things.
Yeah, everything.
But before we get into that, can you tell the lovely viewers who you are and where they can find you on the Tinterwebs?
Yeah, well, I have a YouTube channel. You know me, guys. I'm Medieval Wargamer. The channel is mostly about the 100 Years' War. That's my passion. Actually, exclusively 100 Years' War. But I try, because I don't want to make, it's a very limited subject. I'm trying to expand it with, historical battles, battle reports, painting, biographies, all this. So I'm trying to give it a bit of variety.
Nice. That sounds good.
Expanding the content, not the date range, right? Yeah. Yes. Because if you are limited in a one specific period, you need to give a little bit of more variety in order. I don't have Crusades or Dark Ages or Second World War or Warhammer. So yeah, I don't want to become extremely boring for the viewers.
I don't think there's anything boring about your content. You deal with the 100 Years' Wars. This is the glory days when the English, every summer, nipped over to France, kicked the crap out of them, and they mostly just let us do it rather than take us on, because when they took us on, it was just worse for them.
I hope you don't have French viewers. I hope you.
I have some French colleagues at work, but they know
Okay.
where we stand. They know how this goes. So Nick, the reason we got you in is, well, in a sense of European solidarity with our Greek brothers and all that kind of stuff. It's always good to have. It's always good to have that bit of representation. But you just started some new content recently. You've been running a 100 Years campaign, very much inspired. The system, it seems, designed to recreate that chevauchée experience of the English raiding to try and draw the French into a decisive battle in their own choosing, the battle that we're going to win. Because I think one of the things that people may be less aware of, if we're kind of get into the campaign, I don't know whether you've covered it, is walled cities in this period in particular, big walled cities. People, even great kings, just cannot muster the kind of force you'd need to take that.
Yeah.
If the defender is, in the age of Bill and Bo, as it were, if the defending citizenry is prepared to man its own walls, no one's going to be able to bring an army that's big enough to take that. If it's a proper one, and Paris almost never fell. I mean, the Vikings had tried a few hundred years before. It's just until the kind of advent of cannon and a bit more kind of industrialization in war, these big cities are impossible, right? What you can do is murder them in the open battlefield and take half of their royal family as hostage, and then they might have to give up some of their kingdom.
Yeah.
Is that broadly speaking what people are trying to do here?
Yeah, in the chevauchée. I mean, the only time that you had sieges, big sieges that were successful, was when the chevauchées were made by the kings. So Edward III and Henry V. It took him almost 1 month to take Harfleur, not a huge city, and then he almost his army. So except these two major chevauchées with the kings that took couple of major cities. For example, even the Black Prince chevauchée in Gascony, he was a Black Prince. They never really did any major sieges. They didn't have the time to do sieges of big cities. There was no point because they didn't have the men to keep them. You have to have garrisons there, especially big cities needed big garrisons. There were a lot of people. So chevauchées mostly were a tool for destroying the economy of France. They were burning villages, looting small settlements, or even a little bigger settlements, with palisades or small walls. But big cities were avoided. There was no point unless you had you had a base in France, and you had after the death of Henry V, almost all Normandy was English. So Paris was English. So you had the power to bring and siege different cities because you had the base there. But before, the chevauchées inside the center of France were mostly to destroy villages and farms and maybe win a pitched battle and, as you said, capture some nobles from the French. That's why the English, when they were doing chevauchées, they were moving in 3 divisions that they were quite widely arrayed. So they can burn and can pillage more. They were going in parallel, but they were wide, so they can pillage and burn more areas, instead of being in one line and going one, to just limited place. So, yeah, chevauchées was like this, and many chevauchées didn't even have a battle. For example, a chevauchée called the Grand Chevauchée of John of Gaunt.
Right.
It was
who's the king's brother, Edward III's brother, right?
Yeah, when he was the Black Prince's brother, and the Black Prince's brother, Henry V, I don't remember. So
Black Prince's uncle, I think.
Uncle, yeah, and he did a chevauchée, a grand chevauchée, it was called, and he barely had a couple of skirmishes, and he basically burned the area and then came back. So not all chevauchées were successful, or not all chevauchées there were too many chevauchées that we don't know about. We know the chevauchée of the Black Prince that ended in the Battle of Poitiers. Edward III Chevauchée that ended with the Battle of Crécy. We know, let's say, it's not a Chevauchée, well, the invasion army of Henry V that ended with the Agincourt. But in general, there were too many Chevauchées that we don't know much about because their impact was, minimal, not minimal. They were destroying the economy of France, but they didn't end with any major pitched battles or any major fights. So,
or featured major historical figures as their leaders. They're on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
Now, you've said this word about 30 times, so let's just make sure everyone knows what it is. Chevauchée. It's a dirty French word, but it's okay, guys, because it was mostly what we were doing to them rather than what they were doing to us. So, Nick, a chevauchée is the term we use to describe the kind of raiding campaigns that the English undertook. This is the period where you're going to see it mostly used, that the English were involved in the 100 Years' War. What is a chevauchée?
Well, a chevauchée is basically, I don't know the exact French, let's say, translation, but the chevauchée is basically a quick, fast, let's say, invasion where you move, you don't stop, you just burn the area, you just destroy the economy, pillage, kill, capture, and then you go back. It's not an invasion. A chevauchée is something fast. Usually, it's a mobile army mounted. Regardless that the English fought on foot in the pitched battles, they were all mounted. All the chevauchées were mounted. Longoman,
right down to the bowmen would be like on ponies and stuff. Everybody's moving fast.
Very fast, exactly.
Yeah.
So they were all mounted, even in Crécy and Poitiers, where you had these major battles where the English basically fought. I know always the English fought, and in Agincourt the English fought on foot. The chevauchées is mounted. All the armies mounted, and they're moving fast. They're pillaging. They don't delay for sieges. They don't delay for anything. Just destroy the economy. And basically, it's the morale of the people. In this way, what Edward III, who started this, because Edward III, I think, in my opinion, is the greatest in the medieval times, the greatest king of England, because he organized the army. He used the longbow. He devised the hearse formation that is very famous from the Scottish Wars of Independence. He got his experience, and I believe he's maybe the greatest king or greatest commander of England. The morale of the people when it was destroyed. It was easier for them to accept the English rule. He was doing this to prove to them that, look, your French king cannot protect you, so you should not be loyal to him. So that was the strategy, because you have to understand that when England was invaded by the Normans, there was a mixture. The English royal family spoke French. English language was not that popular with the high nobles. I mean, the English language became a language of the nobility from Henry V. Most of them spoke French, so they were familiar with. It was not a totally different country that is now. They were speaking French.
No, and that whole kind of social structure is a little bit strange to look back now, and it's very modern in a lot of ways. I'm glad you touched on it, Nick. An English knight in 1320 had French ancestors, not that far back, and kind of saw himself as part of an extended French nobility, and therefore was really quite different from the people below him. But his Englishness was also very important to him. That sense of Englishness would really matured under Edward III. That gave the English aristocracy a different identity for the French. But it's their Frenchness is a component part of it. They probably do still speak French as at least a second language, and their grandma was probably French, like literally didn't speak a word of English. So they're kind of a blended culture with a separate identity. which is an aspect, I think, of the 100 Years' War that is completely lost to the modern audience. The modern audience doesn't see the Frenchness of the English aristocracy because it's a bit complicated. You know, they're not. Nationality is one thing, and then kind of culture group is another, and they're definitely part of a French aristocratic culture group.
Yeah,
you know,
and you imagine that it's easier to entice people, it's easier to bring them to your side when, regardless if you have now you have your Englishness, but you speak the same language with them. So when you can speak with the same language, it's easier for you to bring them to your side. You understand what I'm saying? So
yes,
the chevauchée started as a way for Edward III to show to the people, for example, to Normandy, where he was doing his chevauchées, that the French king cannot protect you. You should not be loyal to him. And many of them, you know, Normandy was under English occupation for many years. Gascony was English, basically. Gascony was the greatest ally of the English. The Battle of in the chevauchée with the Black Prince, half of the army was Gascon. And the reason that the chevauchée happened was the Gascon capital de Bouche, and other Gascon nobles went to King Edward III and asked him for help because the French were pressuring him. So they were very, even in the Kingdom of France, there was many different identities there. It was not a solid kingdom. You had the Burgundians who, in the early 15th century, were basically fighting on the side of Henry V, and they were killing, the Dauphinists. You have earlier during the Black Prince's time, Gascony, that was English. You know, it was an English for many hundred years from before. So even in France was not a kingdom, you know, united. It was, you know, it was very different culturally. You know, it was, and many of them were very were actually English, let's say, allies for many years.
I think if it was a modern state, we would say that it was warlordism, right? We'd say that, like, the Duke of Orleans is notionally under the King of France. But sometimes the Duke of Orleans might decide he wants to be King of France this time round. You know? But these different, the big duchies, like Normandy was one of them, you know, these are kind of big power blocks. Yes. And there isn't the centralization of power that there is today. Yes. You know,
yes, Burgundy, for example, the Burgundians were the ones who captured Joan of Arc and gave them to the English. So Burgundy was, the Burgundians were fighting with the Armagnacs. It was a civil war, and Henry V decided to stand with the Burgundians, and the Burgundians were supporting him, especially after his death in the latter part of the 100 Years' War, where the Duke of Bedford and the Earl of Salisbury were commanding the armies on behalf of the son of the Black Prince, who was still, Henry V, who was still minor, Henry VI. The Burgundians were a very important part of the English strategy. They were part in all the battles. The Battle of Cravant, one battle I showed recently on the panel. Burgundians were half an army. In the Battle of Verneuil, again, a big contingent of Burgundians. In all the sieges that the English did, Burgundians were there. So, you know, France was not a united nation. It was not, as you said, the central command, let's say, you know, government. There were many different factions that had different strategies.
Yeah. And the England is kind of one of those factions, and one of the biggest, which is like, that kind of national identity. I mean, people probably have heard, like, you know, Richard the Lionheart, this great English king, was buried in France, right? He was Duke of Normandy first, King of England second. You know, that's the pedigree of all of this. So it's a little bit strange. Nick, we've been like talking for 10 minutes, or for 20 minutes, in fact. We've not even got some pictures up yet. So you've been running a campaign series that you've started on your channel, Medieval Warrior Wargaming, right?
Medieval Wargamer. I changed it a few years.
You changed it. Changed it again. Okay. So you've homebrewed some rules that properly reflect the style of this campaign as much as anything else, so that the actions that the factions take reflect the kind of behaviours that were historical. You've shifted objectives around and so forth, and as of the weekend, I don't know whether you've done a second one yet. You've done the start of it, and the English have done their little bit of raiding, and the French were marching towards them to their death. So, do you want to talk us through your campaign and some of the thinking behind it?
Yeah, I posted.
You got some pictures to show us.
Yesterday. Yeah, just to give you an idea, what I was trying to do, was I had this in my mind for quite some time, because I want to make a campaign, because I like battles to have consequences and have continuation. It's fun, especially when you're playing on your own, a gamer. I'm sort of gamer, especially here in the Middle East. And because it's a chevauchée, that's basically you can do chevauchée. That's the fun part. I don't like campaigns that they are based, they're just a continuation of battles and you just have the results. It doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense for a chevauchée, because in the chevauchée maximum you can have 1 or 2 battles if you were lucky. You know what I mean? It's mostly the English moving around, burning areas, trying to avoiding the French trying to find where the English were. I had a question from a viewer who liked the campaign a lot regarding the scouting. I will explain in the rules. And in my campaign, the English scouting is better than the French. So the French trying to search, okay, you have to do mechanics because you're on your own. Somebody has to play the English. But in truthfully and historically, the English had better scouting than the French in France. The English had much better scouting. And this is obvious from the chevauchés. They were never almost captured. The French very few times managed to outmaneuver the English, and mostly at the end of the chevauchée when the English were looking for a fight. But the English had a better scout system, because you had all these factions in France who were pro-English. So you had Gascons everywhere, you had Burgundians everywhere, you had half of Normandy was English. So you have so many locals who was impossible to get, notice them, and who were pro-English. Half of France was pro-English. So it may sound to the guys who are listening now, or to people who I'm talking to, a bit strange, but the English had better scouting and spy system in France.
Because of that stuff we talked about earlier, though, is we think of nationality as like the primary identifier. The reality that English king is a rival claimant for the kingdom of France, and he's the one that can control these lands. In reality, if he's the one that his armies can roam around here, and the real king can't do anything about it, then I'm a lot better off with this guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it is true that the English had a better system of spies, scouts in France. They had more than the French. Better system. They had spies everywhere, and that's why in most of the chevauchés they managed to outmaneuver the French, even though the French knew the area better. So the question I'm asked, that's the answer, that actually historically the English had better scouting and system in France. So the campaign is, for me, it's mostly, I like it. It's movement on the map, but it's not just movement. I was trying to create some difficulties for the English. The English have the advantage of the fog of war, because I'm playing the English, so I cannot be fair. So the French are moving in predetermined actions. I will discuss about this. But the English have advantages in movement, but I wanted to give them some restrictions, some problems that they have to decide the strategy. I don't want armies to move around an area just moving without any consequences. And if you read about the 100 Years' War, the major issues of chevauchés like this was supplies. The English had to have supplies, and all the castles were mostly French, all the settlements. So big armies like this moved, and they had baggage trains, and if they were running out of supplies, they were in trouble. So I made a supply system that the English army is spending 1 day's one supply for me. So when this is reducing and it goes to zero, the English are losing in every movement army points. You know, we have desertion. So the army is getting smaller and smaller. So the English need to move with a strategy and move in areas where they can loot, for example, farms. They can siege and destroy low-level settlements, so they can get this supply, so they can move. So this was my initial idea. That's how I started it, with trying to give a restriction to the English. I didn't want the armies to move left and right.
To just move freely from one hex to the next. Yeah.
So this was how I started. Now the second major. Let me share some photos I have. So the guys can see and don't have to see my face.
It's true. We just need the voice.
Oh God, I was handsome when I was young, but not anymore.
With that voice, you don't need to be, Nick. Come on.
No, mate. No.
So let's have a look.
My missus takes Nick to bed. I'm telling you, she just puts him on.
Yeah. How do I show photographs? 1 second. It's open already. Wait.
And a present at the bottom there, Nick.
Yeah. I'm doing it now. Just give me a second.
Yes, Walkabout Games. I love that Nick includes a logistics element in his campaign. True fact. Kind of the biggest part of a campaign, surely. It's difficult to represent on the table.
Share a screen. Share a screen. Okay, that's good. Okay. Okay, here it is. So let's start. So yeah. Okay. Can you see now?
Do I need to do this? So we're seeing all the thumbnails here, Nick, rather than any of them particularly big.
Isn't it?
It should be big.
Oh.
Is it big now? It should. It will come for sure. Is it?
No. What you can see, Nick, is what they can see, which is all these thumbnails.
I can see a very big screen now.
I'm just checking out all of the things down the side there, making sure everything's legit.
Are you maybe showing the wrong screen?
Wait, guys, I'm sharing. You can see the thumbnails. Okay, and
yeah.
Wait. So why don't? So I push. This is big now. Does it look big now to you?
No.
It's bigger, but it's just sort of previewing it on the right-hand side. How bizarre.
Let me try one more time. Sorry, guys, but I
supposed
to do this. Let's do it again. Share screen.
I normally go for tab when you choose a share screen. Choose Chrome tab. Can you do that or window?
Screen sharing. Don't show. Okay, share screen. It says Chrome tab. Huh?
Try that if your pictures open up as Chrome tab.
Okay, it has entire screen. Window. It has window or entire screen or Chrome tab. But why I cannot see? Wait. Sorry, guys. I do this in Teams when I have meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me do this again one more time. Slides. Share screen. Share window. Okay. I have to open it fully. 1 sec. Okay.
But they didn't have this problem in medieval France.
Yeah. 1 second. I think I
did sort of.
Okay. I did. I managed. Okay.
For opening windows.
Let's see what we're getting. There we go.
Yay.
Sorry, guys. So Dogs of War. The title came. Why? Now, obviously, the campaign I'm shooting here in where I'm working is limited to the armies I have. For example, if I was back home where I have my big early 100 Years War armies, I would shoot a different campaign. But now I have a limited number of Terry miniatures here, and they are all late 100 Years War. So it's based on this era because I'm political correctness buff. I cannot fight different battles with different miniatures. I cannot. I get very annoyed. So, Dogs of War is basically a book that is written about Robert Knowles and Sir Hugh Calverley, the two leaders of my campaign. Robert Knowles and Sir Hugh Calverley were two low-born knights who became very prominent because they were very tough. They were not great commanders. They were extremely aggressive. They were famous for pillaging, killing, and the book was written about them. I don't remember who wrote it. If you put Dogs of War, you will find the writer. It is written about these two guys who were also, I think, in-laws. I don't know if you know Robert Knowles and Sir Hugh Calverley. They're not from the most famous, but they're famous commanders in the later part of in the middle part of the 100 Years' War. And so that's how I named the campaign, because these two guys are the commanders I'm using. So I don't know if you see this map. I made a map. I will show them to you more in hexes. I like hexes because you can move around. And it's not restricted like if you have some roads or just some points that you cross. Hexes, it's like a real free movement. So when I started this campaign, I had two main questions to answer. First was the one that what would restrict the English? I didn't want to move the English everywhere without any restrictions, just move around and, pillage areas. So I decided this, as it's mentioned, logistics. So the English have supplies, the start supplies, with 10 days. Every day is one movement, 2 hexes or 3 hexes, depending on where you move, and you consume one supply. The English start with 10 supplies, and every day they reduce, and they gain supplies by raiding farms, like this mill you see here. It's a farm, but you can get more supplies, or sieging low-level settlements. Obviously, if they want to try a bigger settlement, but I made it really difficult because it never happened. So this was the restriction for the English, the supplies and the logistics. Then it came to the French, and how would the French move, and how would the French react? Because I was playing as the English, so the French should have some type of AI. You know what I mean? So I was reading this book that I made a review a long time ago called The Solo Wargaming Guide by, I don't remember the name. I have a link under the Gods of War. I have a flip through. Now, I would recommend this book. You can get it, I think, in Wargames Vault PDF. It's called The Solo Wargaming Guide, and it has examples of how you can play a solo game for Napoleonics, and has many aspects of a solo game and of a campaign. And also a very clever idea. He was saying how you play a solo campaign, you decide which army you get, and then you will, how your opponents will move, how will be the artificial intelligence, let's put it this way. So what he suggested was that you have a table, and you roll d6, or if you have more orders, you can roll 2 d6s with predetermined orders. So, for example, let's say you have the French commander who is Bertrand de Gauquelin. You have a table, and he says, you patrol the northern shores of Normandy from Percamp to Harfleur. So this army is moving to these predetermined orders, it's like orders, up and down until an event happens, and then you have to give them another order, or the English appear. So this sounded to me extremely clever. And actually, if depending on the campaign you're fighting now, I don't have a lot of armies, but if you have a campaign with more armies, like, for example, you have 4 or 5 nobles, and you can make these orders more elaborate, then it can make the campaign more interesting, because you're going to have 4 or 5 armies moving around, almost covering the whole area of Normandy or wherever you're going to play, and making the game more difficult. So I felt this sounded like a computer non-playable character doing, following his program, and that's how this guy presented it. And I tried it a couple of times, and it was really fun. It was a very clever idea. And I adopted this idea, and I created a table with 6 basic orders, and whenever the French need to roll for an order, I roll, and this is the predetermined path they will take. Maybe they will go and stop in one of the big cities and wait until the English are spotted again, or they will let's say patrol the south of Normandy, or they will patrol the north of Normandy between I named cities, or they will patrol the center of Normandy. So you have this predetermined movement like a computer game until an event happens that will stop it, and you will roll again, or they will attack the English, and it worked really well. And it came from this book, and they just change it to suit the campaign. So this is how I solved the problem of the French moving. But then here is here is from the same book, the Wargaming. I don't know if you see. This is a weather chart. So this is a weather chart from the book where you have the months and you have the D6 roll. And then, depending on the month, you have fog, light rain, heavy rain, fair, and snow. So every 3 days, I use this weather chart and I roll. And depending on the roll, you have a weather change. Okay, now the chevauchée is in May, so May doesn't have a lot of weather changes in France. It will have heavy rain or light rain. But these events that occur, if they occur, they change a little bit the campaign. Maybe the armies will move a bit slower. Maybe they will consume more supplies. Instead of consuming 1 a day, they will consume 2 because of the rain. just something like this. If it's fog, the line of sight is blocked. So every weather has every change of the weather has its different, let's say, influence to the armies. So this is something I took also from this book, and it's actually quite helpful. So this is how I think. Yeah, go on.
If I can interrupt, Nick, I think when you're playing a game with sort of movement points and hexes, having things that interfere with the numbers become really important. Because you can kind of work out right, well, if I head off that way, it's impossible for him to get me because it's 6 hexes for me and 4 for him or whatever else. So throwing in elements that change those numbers a little bit, remove the sort of deterministic nature of some of those interactions.
Exactly. For example, in my rules, I have a line of sight of 1 hex. If it's foggy or if it's heavy rain, the line of sight becomes 2 hexes. So the English can maneuver the French even if they are in the opposite hex. Or it restricts movement. It creates problems to the English with supplies. So if it's raining or if it's cold or if it's snowing, the English, obviously, somebody who's colder consumes more supplies. So instead of reducing -1 in every move, every day, I reduce -2. And this, again, gives a different strategic option, because if you did your strategy and you calculated that I need 3 days to go to a farm in the south of France or a farm in the south of Normandy, and you made your strategy, and suddenly the weather changes and it rains, and then you spend 2 supplies a day instead of 1, immediately your strategy changes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then as a player, it's more risky, but risk can have rewards, but has consequences, right?
Yeah,
so
obviously.
It makes it more of a contest, I think.
Yeah. So I had this. It sounds complicated. I don't know if it sounds complicated, as I say to the guys, but it's very simple. You just move, you reduce 1 supply. That's it. It's very simple. Now, regarding sieges, if I say sieges, I made it very difficult for the English to attack high-level settlements. I have settlements from level 1 to level 5. Obviously, the level 5 is Rouen, it's Caen, it's a city, or Verneuil is level 4. It's cities that the English cannot really siege. They need to basically, obviously, if you have the armies, if you have the castles, you can play the sieges if you want. But usually the siege, if I can say siege, is a dice face-off, and the city adds its level. So a settlement of level 1 will add +1, and the English will add an aggression factor and initiative factor I put to the commanders. So, For example, Robert Knowles is a very aggressive commander. Historically, he was extremely aggressive. He was almost pillaging. He was not a soldier. He was basically a free company guy. So he's very aggressive. So he adds in his dice the aggression. But when you go to D6s, but when you go to very high level settlements, the settlements roll D8s or D10s. So whatever your aggression is, it's impossible to siege a settlement of the size of Rennes. This would never happen.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you have the strategy to do it, you can do it because I created a rule that if you create siege weapons while you're sieging the city, and this obviously takes time, takes supplies, and that means more movement from the standing armies of the French, so you can be encircled if you stay and do a siege. It will take time. You reduce the numbers, you give negative modifiers to the big cities. So there is a chance, if you're willing, Chevauché, that would never happen, to siege a city like Rennes, for example, but you need to stay there, you need to stay 2 or 3 days, you need to build siege equipment so you can reduce the die roll. At that time, you're spending more supplies. The standing armies of France may they have more time to come and attack you from the rear or the flank. So it's a risky situation, something that never happened. But
it's not that you can't do it, it's just that it is a really bad idea to do that while there are still armies in the field, which is recreating a historical situation. It's not,
exactly.
Okay. Exactly. It's not that no one could have tried this, it's that and everybody knows once you beat that army in the field, you could siege that city if you wanted to.
You could do it.
But beforehand, that's a different deal.
And as you said, in the end, for example, you have the English win with victory points. I calculated the victory points of the map, and I gave, this is a work in progress, and it depends on the armies you have. I gave 15 victory points to the English. The victory points are basically the settlement levels, and if you capture or kill the commander of your opponent. So maybe you have, you have 10 victory points, and you want to finish it. You destroyed the standing armies of France, and you want to get out and go to 15 and go, and you have the city of Rouen that has level 5. Yes, in the end, and you want to do it. You can do it. It's difficult. It will take time, but maybe strategically, at a point of your chevauché, maybe in the end, it's worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, the third thing I was thinking was when are the English spotted? So, okay, we have the French who have a predetermined, let's say, strategy from the orders, from this artificial intelligence orders that I'm giving them. So I have them somewhere here. Here, for example, here are the 6 basic orders I gave them. They're already 6, and you have, I don't know if you can see, move to Rouen and wait until the English are spotted again. Patrol central region along the main roads between Granville and Verneuil. Move to Rennes and wait until the English are spotted again. Patrol the north coast along main roads between Cherbourg and Harfleur. Move to Caen and wait until English are spotted again. Patrol the south of region of Normandy between Rennes and Vernon. But you can make it, because some of friends were asking me to help them because I gave them the map and they want to make their own campaign. By the way, if anybody wants the map, ask me. I have no issue. I have it here. It's not for sale. So they were asking me, and I was saying you can make these orders as elaborate as you want. For example, you can say move to this hex and stay there waiting to ambush if the English pass, or patrol the crossings of the River Seine, or you can say, I don't know, you can make it as detailed and as complex as an order to the French, or as you want. You don't have anything to restrict you. And if you have even more armies fighting, and not like I have 3 nobles here, it can be a lot more interesting. So I have these basic 6 orders, but someone wants to roll a d10 and have 10 orders. Someone wants to roll 2 d6 and have 12 orders. It's very easy. You can think many things. You can think of ambushes. You can think of going to other cities. You can think of patrolling between 2 cities and not the full length of Normandy. there is a lot of orders you can give and a lot of options you can give to the non-playable characters.
Now, to be clear, Nick, this is what
Yeah.
they do when they don't know where the English are.
Exactly, and that was
When
my
they
point.
do know where the English are, they move towards the English, right?
Exactly, and that was my point. I would say how I would, when I was thinking on the campaign, I would say how I will break this. So there are 3-4 ways that you can spot the English. One obviously is if the English move, when the English siege, loot, destroy farms or settlements, they're immediately spotted. We consider that, as soon as the English arrive, the cities sent, and this is what actually happened. The cities sent the scouts, and they inform the standing armies. They inform the major cities. So as soon as the English enter a hex with a city or enter a hex with a farm, the French know where they are, so they can move immediately to this location the English are. If the English move out, obviously the French miss them, but they can go to this location, they can move to this location and then take orders again. In this way, slowly, and especially if you have more armies instead of 2 that I have for the French, you're closing around the English. You know what I mean? The English are spotted because, you see here in this map, these three fires. This was the initial strategy of the English. Robert Knowles entered from this cog in the north, and the initial strategy was to loot these low-level settlements of Dieppe, Saint Valery, and Fécamp, who are 1, 1, and 2. So basically, nothing major, very small settlement, and get very quickly 4 initiative points, and then try to do another strategy. How we go, because the center of Normandy is very congested. And I will explain to you what these horses are. So while I was sieging, I was burning these 3 cities who are very close. The French came really close to capture the English, or at least find them, because that we were working in an area that was very close to each other. So as soon as the English enter a hex with a French city, or attack a French city, or attack a French farm, they are spotted. So the French can go immediately to that location. Another thing I did to make it more difficult for the English is that I created these horses. I put these horses in hexes around cities, settlements, of level 3 and above. We consider these settlements, these cities like Verneuil, like Evra, like Vernon, very, they're big cities like Caen. They have standing armies, they have garrisons that are outside, they have scouts around the area. So to make it a bit more difficult for the English, these areas with the horses are areas that have French scouts from these cities. So if they enter these areas, they get spotted again. So you can see, you restrict the English in their movement. And that was the truth. The English could not move along the road, for example. If the French move along the road, they can move 3 hexes. But if the English move along the road, they can do if they want to, they're immediately spotted, regardless wherever they are, because the English never moved in the main road. So I give these advantages to the French. The French are not hindered by crossing the river. We're considering that they know where to cross. And I'm giving restrictions to the English that there is scouts, there are settlements, there are garrisons, big garrisons in the big settlements. So the English they cannot move freely around the map. That was my aim for the English. At the same time, I gave these orders to the French, this AI, but at the same time, whenever the English were looting or sieging settlements, their location was identified. So this is how this strategy works a bit. It's not that complicated as I explained. I don't know if it sounds complicated, but and this is my first campaign and I'm working in it. It works well. It works well. I'm having a lot of fun. For example, the English cannot cross the rivers whenever they want. The French can, because we consider that the French know the crossings, they know the passing. The English don't. And historically, the problems that the all English kings had with Seine River, Crécy, and Agincourt, Henry V. He couldn't cross. The Battle of Blanchestadt, one of the most famous battles during the Croatia campaign, where it was the only crossing along, I think, the Seine River, and the French were guarding it because they knew it, and the English under Northampton and under one very famous commander, Don Chandos and Reginald Cobham, it was one of the major battles of crossing the river, the Battle of Blanchestadt, before the Battle of Crecy. So the English cannot cross the river whenever they want or easily. They have to roll a dice. If they roll 1, 2, and 3, the river is impossible. If they roll 4, 5, and 6, they cross. But if they roll 1, 2, and 3, they cannot try again in the same location. It doesn't make sense. So they have to move a hex. And try again. So they go further down the bank of the river. If they fail again, they have to move a hex, and then things becoming problematic. Maybe you want to cross the river here, where you see this map, in the Rouen forest. In the forests and in the mountains, there is a fog of war. You cannot be seen, you cannot be spotted, you cannot be attacked. But if you fail, and you have to move another hex, and you fail and you have to move another hex, you're entering Rouen hex. And that means that you're spotted. So I have these difficulties for the English that made sense, because historically happened. Henry V was shadowed along the Seine River by the French, by the French commanders for quite some time, and he found a crossing and managed to outmaneuver the French. Of course, then they captured him in Agincourt. But I try to give all these difficulties to the English regarding movement, regarding supplies, regarding getting spotted easily. So it's not going to be just a free move around the map, just going, okay, let's go here, let's go left, let's go right. Someone who starts this campaign has to have a strategy. And this is what I'm finding now that I'm playing this campaign. I'm finding out that you have to have a plan. Otherwise, you may get in big trouble with, these things I've created on the map. And again, with the French, as I said, I wanted to give them predetermined orders that they can move in areas and control areas. This again gives difficulty to the English, because if, for example, the French are patrolling the Seine River, the English have to cross in a specific location, a specific time, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I wanted to give them a chance to spot the English. So whenever the English are looting, and this is the basic aim of the game, for English to loot and get victory points, so they cannot stop looting, they will be spotted. So that's about it. That's how it works.
So, you've mentioned about in the first part of the video, we were talking about how time after time in the 100 Years' War, the English would absolutely smash the French in open battle, and that's a historical fact. But then in this second part, we'll be talking about the campaign, which might be leaving anybody who's sort of thinking about it critically, like the French needing to find the English needing to avoid the French, and so the English are not going to win any battle on any day, because they're going to be significantly outnumbered by the armies of the kings of France. What they're going to need to do is have a battle at their own time, of their own choosing, when they've decided, okay, we're going to fight here because only half of them are here, and they're knackered because they've been chasing us for 3 days, and it was raining last night, and kind of all of those factors, whatever they are, the English are going to choose that moment because of their mobility, and then they're going to crush that particular force. But they can't, at the beginning of the campaign, actually just walk up to the army of the King of France and beat it. They're going to lose the campaign if they do that. They need to engineer a situation where they're going to win this battle handily.
Yeah, they have to avoid, there are garrisons in big cities, and the garrisons can support the French standing armies. They may need to isolate a small contingent and destroy it, or they need to kill the commander. Whatever happens in a campaign has consequences. That's what I like. For example, if there is a skirmish, let's say Bertrand Clan has he divided his force and he wants to go quickly, and he gets an all cavalry command. And the English ambush him and kill him. This will continue to the remainder of the campaign. He won't be there. So you can make a strategy and work around it, so you can weaken the French, or you can, as you said before, you can decide a pitched battle further away from the big cities, that they have big garrisons that can support the standing armies, come out and add their numbers with the standing army numbers. Or you can fight in difficult terrain where we have here, or you can fight with the banks of the river. At the same time, when I'm fighting these battles, I haven't fought many, it's nice because it has strategies. For example, the first battle I fought in part 1, the English were trying to destroy the settlement of a camp, a level 2 settlement. And the garrison commander decided to sally forth and delay them. It was basically militia, because I have every level of the city has a specific type of troops. You know, big cities have veteran troops and men-at-arms. Smaller cities have town militias and levies. So it was very interesting, because when I was playing this battle, it was very strategic, because what happened, the English didn't want to fight hand-to-hand combat. They didn't want to lose men.
Not that early in the campaign.
Yeah, at the same time, the militia, that's why I'm saying this strategic option made my battle very interesting. So the English wanted to get Verkamp, wanted to get these 2 victory points, but they didn't want to lose people, they didn't lose men, because it's the beginning of the campaign. At the same time, the French militia didn't want to attack the English. They wanted just to delay them. So they were not attacking, but at the same time, the English needed the victory points. So what I did is I moved the English to longbow range, and I started shooting. I did nothing else. And then I forced the militia to attack me. I was playing both, like you can imagine, both armies. But the militia obviously have a lighter armor, have less armor, they have cumbersome, as we said before, or they have chainmail, or they don't have even armor, and they were decimated. And it was the first battle I fought, because I've had many battle reports, that had a meaning, you know what I mean? It had one army, and the other army had a strategy, very different strategy. It was not to win each other. The English had a strategy: we need to take this small settlement, but we don't want to get into hand-to-hand combat. The French wanted to delay them. We don't want to get hand-to-hand combat, but we need to wait and delay them. So the English decided, go longbow range, shoot. They destroyed, obviously, the militia. The militia tried to attack. Until they attacked, there were 4 or 5 arrow barrages. They were broken, and it was finished. So it was one of the first battles I fought, because of the campaign and the background and the requirements of the campaign, that I needed to finish and go. It was not just a battle report that I fought, on my own. It was interesting. So, for example, the English, maybe the French will catch them. During the battle, I have this rule, because I'm using Bill Hook's rules for this battle. And Bill Hooks has some different phases. So in every phase, if, for example, the English want to retreat, every battle phase that finishes, I roll an initiative dice. And I roll a d6, and I add the initiative of each commander. Every commander of the ones who I use in this campaign has an aggression factor and initiative factor. The initiative factor has to do with the army's initiative. For example, if you're in the same hex with your opponent or adjacent hexes, and he wants to fight a battle and you don't, you roll for initiative and you see who managed to do what. For example, if you win the initiative and you want to avoid him, you get a free move and you escape. If you don't win and your opponent wins the initiative, you have to fight a battle. It's something that happens in many rules. Aggression factor is for the sieges and the battles. So I have a rule that every time that the battle phase finishes, we roll for initiative, and then the English, let's say the English want to withdraw, the English are doing an organized retreat in every battle phase until I reach the edge of the table. You know how interesting this made my battles? You cannot believe how fun it was.
That sounds good. Makes it sound quite realistic, You're not just pelting full pelt towards the enemy to smash them up. There are consequences, as you say. and you're playing the long game, aren't you? So I think that's a really clever thing. I'm quite interested to. You'll have to put a link into this book that you've used as a resource, Nick. It's amazing that you've come up with all of this.
And look, maybe the guys who are listening, I hope it's not confusing. It's very simple. It's a lot of strategy behind it. Of how you're going to move, where you're going to find supplies. This is raining. Do we have to double back? This area, let me give you an example in this slide, for example. So the English were before let me find one better. Yeah, for here, for example. The English were at the forest of Rohan. So this strategy, they didn't know what to do. So I was at a point here where I had to cross the river. But if you see my graphics here, this is one of part 2, I think. You realize that you are getting here in the center of Normandy, you're getting in a gauntlet of death. You have 4 or 5 very big cities of level 3 and level 4, and with big garrisons. You have the scouts all around, and you need to cross in this specific location. At the same time, you have a couple of cities here that immediately you will be spotted as soon as you enter, even if you siege them. The last order that the French got was one of the standing armies, Jacques de Courage, if you see here his shield, is at Caen. So if the English are spotted coming across, he has only one move to attack. Then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 big city garrisons that can join. So it was an impossible, it was very risky. So what I did in campaign number 2, the one I posted yesterday, I decided to double back. And I decided to take the eastern route and go under these cities. So let me show you here, just Robert Knowles is moving.
Spoiler alert, spoiler alert.
It's okay, it's been spotted, it's been already, and instead of going at the top, go from the bottom. So to avoid all these cities and scouts and enter the safety of the big forest here in the south of Normandy. So it gives you have to think about what you're doing. You have to think about how you're going to go around, because it's not that easy. You cannot. That was what I was trying to do with the scout hexes and with the big city hexes and with the predetermined movement of the French and with the difficulty of the English and obviously with the supplies. At the same time, you have to think of the weather. You're moving, but suddenly, you live in the UK, guys. I was in the UK for 10, 15 years. The weather, you're walking in London and suddenly it's sunny and suddenly it starts raining. The same in Normandy, every 3 days, 4 days, you may have a different weather change. So suddenly you have a plan, you move from the southeast, you've calculated that today I have these supplies, I will attack these farms, I will attack these low-level settlements, I will get another 2, 3 supplies and I will be fine, and suddenly it rains, or it's heavy rain, and you move slower. So you spend more supplies, or it's colder and the army needs more. So all these changes make the campaign fun. But as I said, at the same time, in a couple of battles I fought that I haven't posted yet because that are for part 3 and 4, were so much fun because they were the aim as a general had to do with having the campaign in mind and what I wanted to do. So that's why I was retreating with the English. I wanted to retreat and slowly go to the edge of the table and then disappear. That's why I didn't force a hand-to-hand combat with the English when I was fighting the low-level settlement of the militia, and I went to longbow range and I came with the 5th and I just shot with my longbows and I broke them. So the battles make more sense and are more fun, at least for me.
And they're asymmetrical because they reflect the campaigns. So you got to make the most of what you've got.
Yeah, exactly. Because then you lose. If you lose units, you can resupply only where you see these ships. These are supposedly the English fleet, who is shadowing the chevauchée, and there is a predetermined location where you can go and replenish your troops and get a couple of supplies. So these ships were 1, 2, 3, 4 locations. So At the same time, when I have all this movement in the map, I have also, I do some kind of cut scenes where I shoot some videos with my miniatures. So yes, I show them. I don't know. You can see them now. I show them. Can you see the minutes?
And these are your 28s, right?
These are 28s Perry. They are. I use them for, I make a couple of cut scenes. I put them. I deploy them because they're individually based. These ones. So I deploy them along the river, and I make like a cut scene showing the English reuniting, Robert Knowles and Sir Hugh Calgary reuniting in the banks of Seine River. So yeah, it's fun. I think many guys like this cut scene.
Yeah, it's lovely.
You've been
this is
a lot of Gamberson.
Yeah, where's the Gamberson? Here it is. Here you have it. I have more. Wait. So here I make these are videos usually, and this is Sir Hugh Calverley, the one commander of the English, and Sir Robert Knowles, and these are Perry miniatures. Obviously, one of the best. Here is Sir Robert Knowles. Both very low-born knights. Actually, they were almost commoners, but they were very tough, and they became very famous. But that's why they have low initiative. Why? Because if you read the story of Robert Knowles and Sir Hugh Calverley, they were very tough commanders. They were very feared. But in many cases, their armies were not following their orders exactly because they were low-born. So I put their initiative a bit lower because orders are not always followed. And that's why Robert Knowles actually lost substantial battle during the Caroline War. The Caroline War was actually the period when Edward III was old. The Black Prince didn't die, but he was sick of dysentery. And then you had the most famous French commander, Bertrand de Coquelin, who basically won all France back. And he won them using exactly the same tactics as the English did. He never fought. He fought very few pitched battles, and he was working with chevauchées and sieges and ambushes, and he won all the gains of the English, Edward III and the Black Prince back until Henry V. So these commanders are in this dodgy period of the English of like 1370, 1380, where the French were winning everything back. And there were good commanders, but it was the period where the amazing commanders of the early part of the 100 Years' War, the Chandlers, the Earl of Oxford, John de Vere, the Reginald Cobham, the Captal de Buches were getting older, were dying. And, always there is a gap until the new generation of brilliant commanders who appeared during the period of Henry V. We have Salisbury, you have Bedford, you have commanders who basically, amazing commanders of the latter part of the 100 Years' War. So these guys, Sir Robert Knowles, Sir Hugh Calverley, appeared at that period. They were very famous commanders. They were very tough. They were very brutal. They were basically acting like free companies, but they were not followed that much because they were low-born. See, Hugh Calverley.
Yeah, that generational thing that you were talking about there, because this, it isn't exactly 100 years, it's 130 years or something, isn't it? But it is a very long period, and it's kind of like, I often see it like major sports teams, is that when they've got a really good team, they keep fielding that team, but actually the young bloods are not nearly so good, so they're keeping these old guys in longer and longer, and they're way past their best. And that's kind of what's happened to the English force in that middle period, isn't it? Yeah. Is that they're still going to war with the same team, but they're not the great captains they were in their youth.
Exactly. It's the same thing everywhere, but you had this period, the Caroline War, where the French won everything back, and you had Bertrand de Coquelin, one very famous commander. Only one commander is enough. He won almost everything back. But the English commanders were not there. As I said before, during the period of Crécy and Poitiers, you didn't have, you didn't know who to choose. The English commanders were all famous commanders, as I said before. Reginald Cobham, Capital de Busse, John Chandos, many people know these guys. Northampton, who all fought together. They were like family. They fought together from very young in the wars of Scottish independence. Then they were in the Crecy campaign. They were in the Scottish campaigns. They were in the Black Princes campaign. They fought in Najera. They fought in Castillon. They were really. It was a period from the 1330s until the 1360s, 1360 something, that these guys started dying and getting older and getting retired. That it was the quality, Salisbury, Northampton, the quality of the English commander was amazing. But then you get at a period where you don't have anybody famous. Okay, so Hugh Calveley is famous, so Robert Knowles are famous, but I can imagine in the period of these famous commanders, they wouldn't exist because they were very low born also. But then you have Henry V who comes, and then you have the Duke of Bedford, you have the Earl of Salisbury, the later, who basically took over even after the death of Henry V, and expanded the victories of the English, and they reach Orleans. And what happens? You have all these commanders, and then suddenly, Lord Salisbury is killed by accidental shots from a cannon from Orleans. Actually, it was the son of one mason, one smith, who everybody went, and that's, amazing that history changes by, I believe, by random events that have major consequences, but they were totally accidental. For example, you have the Earl of Salisbury, who was one of the greatest commanders of the English. He won many battles with Bedford after the death of Henry V. He was at the Battle of Gravant. He won it himself. He was in the Battle of Verneuil. He was Fried, a great commander, and Duke of Bedford. He was commanding the siege of Orleans. Orleans was ready to fall. So if Orleans fell, I don't think we would have France now. It would have been over. If Orleans fell, France would not exist now. It would have been over. It was over for the French. And I'm serious now. I don't think you will have France now if Orleans fell. So he was patrolling. He was checking from one of the English siege camps. He was in a tower checking Orleans, and checking how the siege is going. And the French had their lunch, their food, whatever it was. And one boy who brought the lunch, who brought the soup or whatever the French were eating, I don't know, just a cannon was ready there, and he just lighted up, just for fun.
Just lit the match.
And he killed him.
I think that was me in a previous life.
And this was the end for the English for Orleans. Just after a couple of weeks, and the appearance of Joan of Arc, and obviously the morale was very down, and you didn't have equivalent quality of commanders, the English fell back, and then you have immediately the Battle of Patay, that the English were annihilated, and then you have Castillon, and then finished. Random events that sound so crazy changed the whole
course of the campaign. Yeah.
The same happened with, if we go a bit earlier, with Richard the Lionheart. Richard the Lionheart was coming back from the Crusades. It would have been a very different England if he didn't die, and he was killed by the cook. The cook brought the food to the soldiers, and he just got a crossbow and he shot randomly and he killed him. You know what I mean? So it's very important to understand that when the English flourished and they won the French, and vice versa at the end, it was because of the commanders, because the people follow the commanders, follow the nobles. They see the commanders fighting in the front. They were actually good strategists. The English then, after the death of Salisbury, after the death of Bedford, really didn't have good commanders. They had Falstaff, and they had a couple of law. There was nobody, nobody really of the level of the early 100 Years' War or the Henry V period commanders. And obviously the French had very good commanders at the time. They had the Duke of Orleans, they had La Hire, they had Jean of Arc was part. Jean of Arc had a big group of very, very good commanders who basically started winning back France. Obviously, the War of the Roses brewing up was very important for the English didn't manage to hold France. But at the same time, if you check the 100 Years' War in context from the beginning up to the end, and you add also, and this is something I'm saying when I'm discussing with friends, you add also the wars of Scottish independence, and I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Always the army that's evolving is winning. For example, Robert the Bruce destroyed the English because the Scottish were the first to fight on foot, were the first to fight professionally with schiltrons. They were first to take advantage of the foot. The English were still fighting mounted like the French. And in Bannockburn, the English were annihilated. So the Scottish evolved and won major victories and they won their independence. Then the English evolved. Edward III, from the mistakes and the battles that his father and grandfather lost, his father lost, he dismounted the English. He took advantage of the longbow that became the great weapon of power. And the schiltrons were obsolete, were actually now had no meaning because now with the English using the longbows.
Instead of heavy cavalry.
Well, instead of heavy cavalry, there was no schiltrons. They were slow, they were weak for longbow fire, they were very congested. And then suddenly the English army evolved by bringing the longbow, and the schiltrons were totally obsolete, and you could see this in the Battle of Halid on the Hill, in the Battle of Neville's Cross, where they were totally annihilated. So a weapon that was prominent before, the English army evolved and it was obsolete. The same happened in the 100 Years' War. The French didn't evolve. The French were fighting the typical way of mounted or even foot. But again, the fight with the nobles, taking the charge, ignoring other units, focusing only in the English nobles, ignoring the longbowman, and the English were annihilated. But in the latter part of the 100 Years' War, the English kept the same strategy and the French evolved. And how is this? Because the French became experts in gunpowder. This made the English longbows obsolete. And that's why the French won. So if you paid attention in this timeline I told you, and the army is evolving, you realize that the army that is evolving, that is thinking ahead, in the end it wins. So the English were, for 100 years almost, were confident for this longbow Hearst formation that was devastating. But when the French started thinking, started changing their army consistency, they made professional armies. They were not based in nobles. After the disaster in Verneuil, the French realized that the big armies were a hindrance instead of a bonus. So the French never fielded armies more than 8,000 men. This was a standard from then on. And when the French invested and became experts in gunpowder, that meant that the longbow was over. And that's what happened in Castillon. Castillon, the last battle of the 100 Years' War, where the famous John Talbot died, the Achilles of the English, I was called. What happened was the English attacked. They attacked the typical way with a longbowman, and the French by then became experts in gunpowder, and they annihilated the longbowman, and that was it.
But what I'd also say about the gunpowder in the French, it's often put down to the gunpowder, but most of the gunpowder are actually professional soldiers.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not feudal retained men from the farms. They're professional soldiers, and that's the other thing about we talk about the longbow, but it's the whole system. The longbow man is a man who's paid on retainer to be a good soldier.
Yeah,
it's his job. He's not a part-time farmer. He's a full-time soldier. And that makes a big difference. He's paid. The way feudalism works is everybody owes an amount of service to the next person up in the food chain, and this is one of the reasons the English do the chevauché thing. Is mostly it's something like 30 days, maybe 40, that you owe your lord a service. So that massive French army at the beginning of the campaign is going to disintegrate halfway through because they're not paying them. Once their feudal obligation is over, they start to disappear.
Well, do you know what? My feudal obligation is over.
Yeah,
and I'm about to disappear because I need to eat some food.
Yeah.
So,
We've overrun by half an hour, actually. We've overrun by quite a bit. I'll have me some feudalism.
You do.
Nick, did you in terms of campaign, then let's make sure we don't just kind of leave it hanging there. In terms of campaign, you've recorded a lot more. There's a lot more to come over the coming weeks or months. Yeah. So you can follow Nick's campaign on the channel is called
Medieval Wargamer.
Medieval Wargamer. You can see how the English stuff the French. If not, the rules are wrong. That's all I've got to say. Hobby-wise, I've made some progress on these. They're nearly done now. It's all the fiddly bits, the webbing and stuff, and in 15mm, that's quite hard. Callum, Brush and Quill, how'd you get on hobby-wise?
Yeah, I built my 5 figures.
You did your quota, lovely.
Yeah. Can I just quickly answer Michael Wayne's question there, though? Yes, longbows could outrange muskets, but musketeers are easier to train than longbows.
Are they? Well, I suppose they are, yeah.
Yeah. Point and click.
Point and click adventures. I painted a random Sikh dude. He's very bright.
Is that one the Warlord 8th Army guys? Has he got shorts?
Yes, sir. Short socks and bobbly kneecaps.
Sweet.
And Nick, you're a very passionate man about 100 years of war. 130 years of war. And I was very interested about your doofer there. But now I must go.
Kings of War.
All right. Next time, in 2 weeks' time, we have got 6up Steve-O, who is a 40k gamer, loves his orcs. He's quite a lively chap. Looking forward to having him on. We went to Warlord Day. I interviewed Mr. John Stallard. That will hopefully be coming out on Friday. I just said it. I like when he interviewed the big guys. I like to give them an opportunity to say, could you cut this out or whatever. They never do, but that should be out on Friday. There's a few new products came out. Army boxes from Warlord. There's a mid-war Soviet one we just did, didn't we, John? And
yes.
The British Commandos. So we've made a couple more videos there. They'll be coming out over the next few weeks. And I guess that's probably about it from us. No comments. Everybody was real quiet in the chat tonight. I think they were all just listening and learning.
Nick's velvety voice.
Yeah, we do love Nick's velvety voice. Alright guys, I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.
Well.